Hi guys, and welcome to Relaxation Bedtime History. Tonight we drift into the 1880s Wild West, where the air tastes like dust and iron and the ground hums softly under your boots as if it remembers every footstep that came before yours. You stand at the edge of a town that is barely a town at all, more a suggestion made of boards and hope, and you already sense that sleep will come easier once you understand how this place breathes. There is a quiet promise in the lamplight and a quiet warning too, because you probably won't survive this if you bring modern expectations with you. Life here does not bend gently. It expects you to bend first. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you are still awake enough, tell me where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights. You step forward into the story and the sound of your own breathing feels louder than it should. You arrive without ceremony, no fanfare, no swelling music, just the creak of leather, the clink of a tin cup, and the soft groan of wood as a building settles into the evening. The Wild West of the 1880s does not announce itself as legend. It presents itself as work waiting to be done. You are not a hero here. You are another body with a plan, another pair of hands that may or may not last the season. The first thing you notice is space. It stretches in every direction wide enough to make you feel important for half a second, then small enough to make you feel very alone. Towns are scattered, not clustered. Between them lie hours, sometimes days, of nothing but windgrass and sky. A mainstream historical fact often surprises people here. In the 1880s, many western towns had populations smaller than a modern apartment building, yet they carried reputations far larger than their numbers. Word travelled faster than people carried by rail, gossip newspaper, exaggeration, and the human habit of sharpening a story until it shines. You are carrying everything you own, or at least everything that matters. The weight presses into your shoulders, not painfully, but insistently. You learn quickly that comfort is not a priority. Survival is. Your boots are stiff. Your clothes already smell like sweat and dust. The sun, even as it lowers, still holds heat like a grudge. It touches your skin and does not apologize. Around you, people move with purpose that looks casual only because it has been practiced. Someone lifts a crate without asking for help. Someone else spits into the dirt, a small habitual act that marks territory and time. Children run past barefoot or nearly so, already skilled at dodging wagons. They glance at you once, curious but not impressed. Newcomers arrive often. Many do not stay. You begin to understand that the Wild West is less about gunfights and more about thresholds. Every day is a decision point. Do you push farther or settle here? Do you trust this place or keep your guard tight? Historians still argue whether most settlers came west chasing opportunity or simply running from something they could not fix back east. Standing here, it feels like both can be true at once. You feel the pull of possibility in your chest, and right behind it, the fear of getting it wrong. There is a smell you did not expect. It is not just dust or manure, though both are present. It is wood sap, animal hide, coffee grounds, and smoke layered together. It clings to the air and settles into your hair. At night, this smell will change slightly, cooling and sharpening, reminding you that warmth is temporary and earned. A quirky tidbit, often missed in popular retellings, drifts into your awareness as you watch people pass. Many newcomers carry small personal objects meant to ward off bad luck. A coin sewn into a coat, a ribbon tucked into a pocket, even a dried animal tooth. These are not jokes or fashion. They are quiet negotiations with uncertainty. When medicine is limited and weather is indifferent, superstition feels practical. You hear a hammer strike metal somewhere down the street. The sound echoes once, then disappears, swallowed by distance. It tells you that someone is repairing something that broke today. That will happen often. Wheels crack, roofs leak, tools fail. Nothing here is permanent except the need to fix what comes undone. As evening deepens, lanterns begin to glow. Not all at once. One here, one there. Each flame is a small declaration that someone plans to stay awake a little longer to finish a task, to cook a meal, or to simply sit and think. You notice how darkness does not rush in. It seeps. Shadows lengthen slowly, giving you time to adjust. You also notice how quiet it can be. Not silent, but open. Sound travels differently when there are fewer walls. A cough carries. Laughter drifts farther than intended. Privacy is not guaranteed by distance. It is negotiated through habit and respect, or ignored entirely. You find a place to pause. Maybe it is a hitching post, or the edge of a porch. You rest your weight and let the day settle inside you. Your body already understands something, your mind is still learning. The pace here is not fast, but it is relentless. There are no days off from existence. Even rest requires planning. As the stars begin to show, brighter than you remember them ever being, you realize that night will not soften the world completely. It will cool it, yes, but it will also sharpen edges. Sounds will feel closer. Thoughts will wander farther. Sleep, when it comes, will be practical rather than luxurious. You are here now. In the 1880s, Wild West living does not mean thriving. It means adjusting, enduring, and sometimes simply staying upright until morning. The ground beneath you feels solid enough for tonight. Tomorrow will ask new questions. Morning arrives without asking whether you are ready. Light slides across the land in a pale wash, revealing details you missed in the dimness. You see how uneven the ground really is, how buildings lean just slightly as if they are already tired. The air feels cooler now, carrying the faint smell of damp earth and old smoke. You inhale slowly and sense that today will not be about dreams. It will be about placement, about choosing where and how you will exist in this wide stretch of nowhere. Finding shelter is not a single decision. It is a chain of small ones that stack on top of each other. Where you sleep tonight depends on where you stand right now. And where you stand depends on the land itself. You learn quickly that the ground here is not neutral. It can be generous or unforgiving, sometimes both within the same day. You walk the edge of town, and beyond it, boots pressing into soil that changes texture every few steps. Dry dust gives way to packed clay. Grass thins, then thickens again. You notice slight dips where water collects after rain and higher ground that catches more wind. These details matter. A mainstream historical fact settles into your thinking as you observe. In the 1880s, many settlers chose their home sites based less on scenery and more on access to water and protection from seasonal flooding. A beautiful view could become a liability in a single storm. You kneel and touch the earth. It is cool beneath the surface, holding last night's cold like a memory. When you rub it between your fingers, you can feel whether it will pack well or crumble. This is knowledge you acquire not from books, but from watching others fail and succeed. Someone nearby gestures toward a low area and shakes their head. You understand without words. That place looks fine now, but spring will change everything. Shelter options are limited, and each carries its own quiet warnings. A tent offers speed and mobility, but little defense against wind that cuts sideways, and rain that finds seams you did not know existed. A dugout promises insulation, but demands labour and faith that the roof will hold. A rough wooden structure takes time tools and neighbours willing to help. You weigh these choices with the seriousness of someone choosing how they will sleep, how they will heal, how they might survive sickness or injury. Historians still argue whether most early frontier shelters were built as temporary solutions or intended as long-term homes that simply never evolved. Standing here, it feels like intention matters less than outcome. Many people plan to improve later. Many do not get the chance. You notice how the sky changes as the sun climbs. Clouds form quickly, then stretch thin. Weather here does not always announce itself politely. A breeze can turn sharp without warning. You feel it on your neck and instinctively pull your collar closer. Shelter is not just about walls. It is about orientation, which way the door faces, how much morning sun reaches the interior, where smoke will travel when you light a fire. A quirky tidbit drifts into your awareness as you watch a man adjust canvas over a frame. Some settlers deliberately chose slightly inconvenient locations, believing that too much comfort bred carelessness. A harder spot they thought would keep them alert and disciplined. Whether this helped or simply exhausted them is another question entirely. You speak to someone who has been here longer. Their voice carries a calm that feels earned rather than optimistic. They point out how the wind usually moves in the evening, how frost settles in low places first, how animals choose paths that hint at hidden water. You listen carefully. Advice here is not casual conversation. It is a transfer of survival. As the day wears on, you begin preparing the ground, even if only symbolically, clearing stones, marking a rough boundary, laying out where something might stand. Each action makes the place feel slightly more real, slightly more yours. Ownership here is fragile. It exists in effort as much as in paperwork. A claim is only as strong as the presence that maintains it. You feel the sun on your back as you work, and sweat gathers slowly. Your muscles complain not sharply, but steadily. This labour does not feel heroic. It feels necessary. Around you, others do the same bent shapes against a wide sky. No one watches for long. Everyone has their own ground to argue with. As afternoon deepens, the light grows warmer, then harsher. Shadows shorten, then begin to stretch again. You notice how quickly time moves when you are focused. Hunger arrives quietly, a hollow awareness rather than a demand. You sit on a rock and drink from what you have brought, careful not to waste a drop. Water already feels precious even before scarcity truly sets in. The ground beneath you holds warmth now. When you place your palm against it, you feel the day stored there. At night, that warmth will fade. You think ahead, imagining how cold will move in once the sun leaves. Shelter is not just for today. It is for nights when the world pulls heat away from you inch by inch. As evening approaches, you return to town carrying dirt under your nails and a clearer understanding in your mind. The place you chose is not perfect. None are. But it is workable, And in the 1880s, Wild West workable is often the difference between staying and leaving. Lanterns glow again as you pass familiar faces. You exchange nods that feel slightly different now. You are no longer just passing through. You have measured the land. You have made a quiet agreement with it. Tonight you will sleep knowing where you stand, and that knowledge brings a small, steady comfort. You wake with stiffness that feels earned rather than alarming. Muscles remember yesterday, even if your mind tries to drift past it. The morning air presses cool against your skin, and you pull yourself upright with a slow patience that already feels learned. Today is about making something stand. Not permanently, not beautifully, but enough to hold you in place when the wind decides to test your resolve. Building a home here does not begin with blueprints. It begins with availability. What materials exist nearby? Who has a saw? Who owes a favour? Who might help if asked kindly and fed well? You walk toward your chosen spot carrying tools that feel heavier than they should, partly from their weight and partly from what they represent. If these fail, the structure fails. If the structure fails, everything else becomes harder. Wood is the most common answer though, not always the easiest. Trees may be plentiful, but cutting, hauling and shaping them is a negotiation with your own strength. You swing an axe and feel the vibration travel up your arms. The sound rings sharp and final in the open air. Each strike is deliberate. You learn quickly that rushing costs more energy than it saves. A mainstream historical fact slips naturally into your awareness as you work. By the 1880s, standardized lumber was becoming more available in some regions thanks to expanding railroads, but many frontier homes were still built from locally cut logs, sod or scavenged materials. Uniformity was a luxury. Adaptation was the rule. You stack logs or boards with care, aligning edges as best you can. Gaps appear anyway. They always do. You tell yourself that you will fill them later with mud straw cloth or whatever you can spare. Perfection is postponed indefinitely. What matters now is stability. A wall that leans too much will not forgive you later. Others drift in and out as the day unfolds. Someone offers advice without being asked. Someone else hands you a nail and nothing more. Help here is rarely dramatic. It arrives in small gestures, in pauses taken from someone else's own work. You return these favours mentally, knowing they will be called in at unexpected times. Historians still argue whether frontier homes were primarily expressions of cultural background or simply the result of environmental necessity. Standing here, sweat tracing slow lines down your spine, the debate feels distant. You build the way you can, not the way you might prefer. You lift a beam into place and feel your breath shorten with the effort. For a moment, the world narrows to weight and balance. Then it settles and you step back, surprised by the shape that has emerged. It is rough, it is uneven, but it exists. That alone feels like progress. A quirky tidbit comes to mind as you pause to wipe your hands. Some settlers deliberately left small imperfections in their homes, believing that flawless structures tempted misfortune or envy. Whether this belief offered comfort or simply excused fatigue is unclear, but the idea fits the mood of the place. Here, humility feels safer than pride. As afternoon wears on, the sun bakes the wood and dries the earth around you. The smell of sap grows stronger. You notice how sound changes inside the partial structure. Your footsteps echo differently now. Wind hums through gaps, creating low, uneven tones. The shelter is already speaking, testing its own voice. You think about the roof, it looms as both necessity and challenge. Without it, the walls are just suggestions. With it, the interior becomes something you can inhabit rather than endure. You climb carefully aware that a fall here would not be a small inconvenience. There are no safety rails, no soft landings. You move with caution that feels instinctive rather than fearful. As you work, your hands grow rougher. Small cuts appear without announcement. You notice them only when they sting. You rinse them with water that you measure carefully, then return to the task. Pain here is acknowledged, not indulged. There will be time for rest, later you hope. By late afternoon, shadows stretch long and thin. The structure casts one of its own, now a crooked shape on the ground that feels strangely satisfying. You step inside and stand still. The air is different here, calmer, contained. It smells of fresh wood and effort. The light enters through gaps, creating narrow beams that drift slowly as the sun moves. You imagine a fire here someday, smoke rising, warmth settling, sleep coming more easily because the wind is kept at bay. The thought steadies you. It is not luxury you crave, it is predictability. As evening approaches, you secure what you can and leave the rest for tomorrow. The frontier teaches you to stop before exhaustion makes mistakes for you. You step back outside and look once more at what you have made. It is not impressive, it would not last long against judgmental eyes, but it is yours in the only way that matters here. It is built by your hands, shaped by your choices, and tested by the same environment that will test you. You return to town as the light fades, shoulders aching, palms sore, but mind quieter than it was before. Tonight, when you sleep, you will dream of walls holding steady and roofs that do not leak. In the 1880s Wild West, that is ambition enough. You wake with your mouth dry, not painfully, so just enough to remind you that comfort here is always provisional. The shelter you began feels quieter this morning, holding the night's cool a little longer than the open air did. As you step outside, the land greets you with a stillness that seems almost polite. Birds are present, but restrained. Wind moves lightly as if conserving energy. Today your attention narrows to one concern that quickly becomes central to everything else: water. You have some but not much. What you carried yesterday is already lighter, and the weight you miss most is not in your pack, but in your awareness. Every sip now feels like a decision. You swallow slowly, letting it linger, noticing how your body responds with gratitude that borders on relief. Around the town, people begin their routines with a similar focus. Buckets appear, canteens are checked, conversations pause near pumps and barrels. In the 1880s, West reliable water access shaped settlements more than almost any other factor, even if maps and advertisements rarely emphasized it. Towns rose and fell based on wells that either produced steadily or betrayed everyone who depended on them. You walk toward the nearest known source, a shared well set slightly downhill from the main cluster of buildings. The ground around it is worn smooth by feet and hooves. Mud has dried into cracked patterns. Someone is already there drawing water with practiced rhythm. The rope creaks softly, a sound that feels reassuring because it means the system still works. You wait your turn and observe. The water comes up cloudy at first, then clears as the bucket settles. You watch how carefully it is poured, how little is spilled. Waste here is not dramatic. It is quiet and cumulative. enough small losses turn into big problems faster than anyone expects. There's no universal agreement among scholars about how often frontier wells failed entirely versus simply producing water of declining quality. Standing here, watching sediment swirl faintly in the bucket, you understand why the distinction mattered less to the people who drank it. Water that made you sick was only marginally better than no water at all. You taste it earthy, metallic, not unpleasant, but not inviting either. It leaves a faint dryness behind, as if it takes something with it when it goes down. You remind yourself that this is normal here. Your body will adapt, or it will complain until it does. As you carry your portion back towards your shelter, you feel the strain in your arms. Water is heavier than you want it to be. Every step reinforces its value. You pass others doing the same, moving carefully eyes on their buckets. There is a shared understanding that accidents here are not funny. A stumble is not a joke. It is a setback. One lesser-known detail from daily frontier life drifts into your thoughts as you walk. Some families marked water containers with notches or symbols to track usage, not out of obsession, but out of survival instinct. Knowing how quickly supplies diminished helped prevent arguments and panic later. You reach your shelter and set the water down in the shade, instinctively choosing a spot where the sun will not claim it too quickly. Heat changes water. It alters taste and encourages things you would rather not think about. You cover the container loosely, allowing air, but keeping debris out. These small habits accumulate into safety. Later, you venture farther from town, following advice you heard yesterday about a seasonal stream. The land dips and rises gently, grass thickening. Where moisture lingers longer, you hear it before you see it. A faint trickle, almost embarrassed by its own existence. When you reach it, the water is shallow and slow, moving over stones worn smooth by time rather than force. You crouch and study it. Clear enough to see the bottom, but clarity can be deceptive. You know this already. You dip your fingers in and feel the cold. It is tempting to drink immediately, but you resist. Illness here arrives quietly and leaves loudly. You collect some water anyway, planning to boil it later if fuel allows. Researchers continue to debate how much frontier sickness stem from contaminated water versus poor nutrition and exposure. From where you kneel, the categories blur. Everything here interacts. Weakness invites illness. Illness drains strength. Water sits at the centre of that cycle, quietly influencing outcomes. As the sun climbs, the stream recedes slightly, as if reminding you that it is not a promise. You make a mental note of its location, then another note not to rely on it. The West teaches redundancy early. One source is none, two is barely enough. By midday, heat presses down with more insistence. Your thirst returns faster now. You sip sparingly, feeling the water slide down and settle. Your body seems to ask for more, then remembers restraint. You sit in the shade and listen to the land. Insects buzz. A distant wagon creaks. Somewhere someone laughs briefly, then stops. You notice how water shapes social behaviour. People linger near it. Conversations begin and end there. Disputes flare when access feels threatened. Cooperation becomes practical rather than idealistic. Sharing is encouraged, but accounting is precise. As afternoon stretches on, you help someone reinforce the well's edge, packing earth and stones to prevent collapse. No one announces this as community service. It is simply understood that the well must be protected. You work in silence, hands' dirty movements steady. The rope hums again as someone draws water, and the sound feels almost ceremonial. When evening approaches, the heat loosens its grip. Shadows lengthen. You return to your shelter with enough water for the night, and early morning, not more. You set it carefully where you can reach it without standing. This detail matters more than you would have thought. As darkness settles, you lie back and listen to the faint movements of the night. Your thirst is quiet now, satisfied but alert. Water, you realize, is not just something you consume here. It is something you manage, respect, and think about constantly. In the 1880s, Wild West survival often flows from such unglamorous considerations. You close your eyes knowing where your next drink will come from, and for now, that knowledge is enough to let sleep arrive. Hunger does not arrive dramatically. It settles in like a low-pressure system, changing how everything feels without announcing itself. You notice it first in the way your thoughts shorten, how decisions feel heavier than they did yesterday. Morning light finds you already awake, stomach quietly reminding you that effort requires fuel. Food here is not about pleasure. It is about continuity. You check what you have left and take inventory with a seriousness that feels older than you are. Flour, salt, a small amount of dried meat that resists your knife more than you would like. Each item represents time, labour, and choices made earlier. Nothing is casual. You step outside and breathe in air that smells faintly of last night's fires. Somewhere nearby, someone is already cooking, and the scent drifts across the open space with surprising authority. It makes your mouth water before you realise it. Hunger sharpens the senses first, patience second. Records from the late 19th century suggests that many frontier diets were far more monotonous than popular stories imply. Fresh food was rare unless you could grow it, hunt it, or afford it. You feel that truth as you chew slowly, making a simple meal last longer by force of habit rather than enjoyment. Hunting seems like an obvious solution, but it carries risks that do not show up in romantic paintings. You shoulder a weapon that feels heavier today, perhaps because expectation now rests on it. You move carefully, aware that every step costs energy you cannot waste. The land is quiet but not empty. Tracks appear and vanish. Signs tease without committing. You spot movement in the distance and pause breath shallow. For a moment, possibility rises, then it fades. The animal moves on, uninterested in your plans. You remind yourself that luck is not personal. It does not reward effort consistently. It simply passes through. There is disagreement among researchers about how often frontier settlers relied on hunting versus preserved staples. Standing here waiting for something to present itself, you understand why preservation mattered. Hunting is opportunity. Stored food is insurance. You return with nothing but dust on your boots and a deeper appreciation for what remains in your pack. You prepare what you can, combining ingredients in ways that stretch quantity over satisfaction. Heat transforms them into something warm, which matters almost as much as calories. Warm food settles differently in your body. It reassures as it nourishes. A surprising habit sometimes appeared among settlers during lean periods. Meals were eaten more slowly than necessary, not out of ceremony, but to allow the body time to register fullness. You do the same without thinking, chewing deliberately, setting food down between bites, listening to the quiet around you. As the day unfolds, hunger becomes a companion rather than an emergency. It walks beside you, influencing choices subtly. You lift less. You pause more often. You think ahead to tomorrow and the day after. Food shapes time here. It stretches and compresses it. You notice how people exchange information about supplies. Not loudly, not competitively. Someone mentions a trader passing through next week. Someone else notes that beans arrived with the last wagon. These details circulate like currency. Knowledge feeds people before food does. By afternoon, you help someone salt meat they managed to secure earlier. The smell is sharp and unmistakable. Your hands sting slightly from the salt, but you do not mind. Preservation feels like victory. The meat will not be tender, but it will last. That matters more. Scholarly interpretations continue to differ about how nutritionally deficient frontier diets truly were. From your position sitting on the ground with sore legs and a steady ache behind your eyes, the question feels academic. What you know is how your body responds, how quickly strength returns when you eat well, how fast it fades when you do not. As evening approaches, you prepare a final meal for the day. Simple, repetitive, familiar already. You eat as the light softens the sky, shifting through colours that feel too gentle for how demanding the day has been. The contrast calms you. You clean what little cookware you used, careful with water, careful with scraps. Nothing is thrown away without thought. Even waste can serve a purpose here. Bones are saved, grease is collected. Leftovers are planned. Night brings quiet again, and with it reflection. Hunger has not vanished, but it has eased. You lie back and feel the warmth of food settle a rare sensation of adequacy. Not abundance, just enough. You realise that living in the 1880s Wild West means recalibrating expectations constantly. Food is not guaranteed, but it is manageable. Hunger is not dramatic, but it is persistent. Survival happens in these small adjustments, these ordinary negotiations between need and availability. As sleep approaches, your stomach feels calm and your mind follows. Tomorrow will ask again, but for now you have answered sufficiently. You close your eyes, knowing that sustenance here is not about satisfaction. It is about continuing, and tonight continuing feels possible. Work does not wait for permission. It greets you the moment you open your eyes, already arranged in your thoughts, like a list you did not write, but are expected to follow. Your body feels heavier today, not injured, just aware. Muscles remember lifting, bending, carrying. The stiffness loosens as you move, and soon motion itself becomes the medicine. There is no bell to signal the start of labour, no whistle, no clock you trust. Time here is measured by light temperature and how much your hands can still do before they begin to shake. You step outside and feel the morning cool against your face, a brief kindness before the day asserts itself. Tasks wait everywhere. Wood needs splitting. The shelter needs reinforcing. Someone nearby asks if you can help lift a beam. You agree without weighing the cost. Refusing work too often marks you as unreliable, and reputation travels faster than you expect. In places like this, your usefulness becomes your introduction. Accounts from the period describe frontier labour as constant but not always frantic. The pace was steady, driven less by urgency and more by accumulation. You feel that rhythm as you work. One motion leads into the next. There is little room for distraction. Your mind quiets because your body is busy. You lift carry stack and adjust. The sun rises higher, and with it comes heat that settles into your shoulders and lower back. Sweat darkens fabric. Dust clings to damp skin. You stop occasionally, not to rest fully, but to reset your grip or stretch a joint that threatens to stiffen permanently. There is ongoing debate among historians about whether frontier settlers worked longer hours than their counterparts in eastern cities. From your vantage point, the comparison feels incomplete. Work here does not end cleanly. It bleeds into meals, into conversations, into evenings that still involve mending, sharpening, or planning. Even rest is framed by what must be done next. A lesser known aspect of this labour culture reveals itself as the day progresses. People become adept at conserving energy through technique rather than strength. You watch how someone leans a load against their hip instead of lifting it fully, how another uses momentum instead of force. These small efficiencies add up, and you begin to copy them without being told. Midday arrives quietly. Hunger flickers, but does not dominate. You eat standing up, sharing a brief exchange with someone else who is doing the same. There is no formal break, just a pause long enough to keep going. The food tastes secondary to its function. As the afternoon stretches on, fatigue shifts from physical to mental. Mistakes become more likely. A nail bends, a measurement goes slightly off. You catch yourself before frustration builds. Losing your temper here costs energy you cannot afford. You breathe, adjust, and continue. Scholars examining diaries from this era often note how rarely people complained about work itself. Instead, they mentioned weather, illness, or broken tools. The labour was assumed. Complaining about it would have felt like complaining about gravity. Late in the day, you help repair a wagon wheel. The task requires patience more than strength. You hold pieces steady while someone else works. Your arms ache from remaining still, a different kind of strain. When it is finished, the wheel turns smoothly and the satisfaction feels shared even though no one celebrates it openly. As light begins to soften, work slows without stopping. Movements become more deliberate, voices lower. People begin to think about what must be secured before night. Tools are gathered, fires are checked, animals are tended. Nothing is left to chance if it can be helped. You return to your shelter carrying the residue of the day in your muscles and joints. The ache feels earned. It settles into you rather than demanding attention. You drink water slowly, aware of how much your body has given. Evening brings a different kind of labour. You patch a gap. You adjust a hinge. You plan tomorrow's priorities in your head. This quiet work feels almost restful by comparison, though it still requires focus. There is uncertainty among researchers about whether people on the frontier experienced greater physical resilience or simply had fewer alternatives. Lying down, at last, you suspect it was both. The body adapts when it must. Complaints fade when they serve no purpose. As darkness closes in, you stretch out and let stillness return. Work has shaped the day completely from the first movement to the last thought. There was no moment when it truly stopped, and yet within that constancy you find a strange calm. Tomorrow will bring more tasks, it always does, but for now the work releases you. Your body sinks into rest, and your mind follows, knowing that effort here is not something you finish, it is something you live inside. Money feels thinner here than you expected, even when you technically have some. It exists less as something you hold and more as something you promise. You sense this early in the day when you reach into your pocket and feel coins that already seem spoken for their weight, familiar but unreliable. Value on the frontier is fluid, shaped by distance, timing, and need rather than numbers stamped into metal. You step into a small store that smells of flour, dust, leather, and something faintly sour that might be old apples or damp wood. Shelves sag under uneven loads. Nothing is arranged for display. Items sit where they fit. A ledger lies open on the counter pages, worn thin by fingers that have traced names again and again. You ask about supplies, and the answer comes with a pause. The shopkeeper looks at you, then at the ledger, then back at you. Prices are mentioned, but they sound negotiable, as if spoken out of habit rather than certainty. You realise quickly that cash is only one language here. Trust is another. So is reputation. People in the 1880s West often lived ahead of their actual means, relying on seasonal income or future harvests that had not yet happened. You feel the weight of that gamble as you agree to terms that stretch forward in time. Credit is extended, not because you are convincing, but because refusing would limit everyone's options. You sign your name or make a mark aware that ink carries consequences here. The ledger does not judge, it remembers. You leave with what you need and a quiet obligation that now walks beside you. Outside, you overhear a conversation about a man who left town owing more than he could repay. The tone is not angry, it is resigned. Loss here is absorbed, slowly distributed across many shoulders. No one expects perfection, they expect effort. There is disagreement among those who study frontier economies about how often barter replaced currency. Watching exchanges unfold, you see that the line between the two blurs constantly. A sack of grain offsets a debt. A day of labour cancels part of another. Money keeps track, but it rarely settles everything. You trade work for supplies later that afternoon. Your hands earn more than your coins. You help mend a fence, reinforce a roof, move something too heavy for one person. Each task chips away at what you owe, both materially and socially. Payment arrives in practical forms: food, materials. A nod that means you are now part of the rhythm here. A curious habit becomes apparent as you observe others doing the same. People keep mental ledgers alongside the written ones. They remember who helped during hard weeks and who disappeared when asked. These memories shape future generosity more than any contract ever could. As the day warms, you pass by a group negotiating over livestock. Voices remain calm, but tension hums beneath the surface. Animals represent stored effort, future food and mobility all at once. The discussion stretches longer than you expect, not because of disagreement, but because everyone wants to avoid regret later. Scholars examining frontier records sometimes struggle to reconcile how informal these systems appear with how resilient they prove to be. Standing nearby, you understand that flexibility is strength here. Rigid systems crack under strain, adaptable ones bend. You spend part of the afternoon repairing your own things, mindful that replacing them will cost more than you can spare. A torn strap is stitched carefully, a loose handle is tightened. Ownership here carries responsibility beyond use. Maintenance is an economic act. As evening approaches, you count what remains. Not obsessively, just enough to orient yourself. You know where you stand roughly. That feels sufficient. Anxiety fades when uncertainty is acknowledged rather than denied. You sit with others as the light softens, sharing quiet conversation that circles around weather work and future plans. No one speaks in large ambitions. Goals here are modest and immediate. Make it through winter. Secure enough supplies. Keep the shelter standing. You notice how rarely people mention wealth in abstract terms. Success is described through stability, fewer repairs needed, enough stored for emergencies, time to rest without guilt. These are currencies that matter more than coins. Night settles in and you return to your shelter carrying the day's transactions in your mind. None of them feel complete. All of them feel necessary. You place your coins where you can find them easily, not because they are precious, but because they are tools like any other. Lying down, you think about how money here does not promise comfort. It promises options, sometimes. And even that promise depends on who you are and how you have shown up. Sleep comes gradually as you accept this arrangement. The West does not demand riches. It demands participation. You close your eyes knowing that tomorrow's economy will be shaped again by hands weather and the quiet agreements people make just to keep moving forward. You wake to the sound of fabric shifting, the soft scrape of cloth against skin as you move. Clothing here announces itself constantly. It pulls rubs, warms and irritates. Before you even stand, you're aware of every layer you put on the day before and every place it failed to protect you. You dress slowly, not out of leisure, but because dressing is already a calculation. Which shirt is clean enough to wear again? Which one dried stiff and will soften once your body warms it? You choose based on function, not appearance. Style exists here, but it is secondary, shaped by durability rather than trend. Outside, the air is cooler than you expect, and your clothes respond before you do. Fabric tightens slightly, holding last night's chill. You tug sleeves down, tuck edges in, and adjust straps that have loosened. Every movement is familiar now. Clothing becomes an extension of your body rather than something separate. In the late 19th century, most people on the frontier owned fewer garments than modern individuals might wear in a single week. You feel that limitation each morning. Washing takes time, water, and effort. Drying depends on weather and patience. As a result, garments are worn until they truly cannot be worn anymore. As you step into the day, dust rises almost immediately. It settles into seams, cuffs, and folds. By mid-morning, it coats your boots and creeps upward. You stop noticing it after a while, except when you wipe your face and feel grit against your skin. Cleanliness here is relative. It is about avoiding illness rather than achieving freshness. You watch someone nearby mend a sleeve while standing needle-moving quickly through fabric that has been repaired many times before. The stitches are uneven but strong. This is not decorative work. It is maintenance. Clothing is patched, altered and reused until its original shape is only a memory. There is some disagreement among researchers about how much frontier clothing reflected cultural identity versus simple availability. Standing among people dressed in similar shades of brown, grey and faded blue, the answer feels obvious. Colour fades quickly under sun and wear. What remains is practicality. Heat arrives as the sun climbs and layers come off reluctantly. You feel exposed without them, not just to temperature but to the world itself. Clothing here is a barrier as much as a covering. It protects from wind, insects, rough surfaces and unwanted attention. You keep a layer on even when sweat gathers because the alternative feels worse. A small unexpected habit reveals itself as the day unfolds. People air their clothes whenever possible, draping them over fences, rocks or wagon sides. Sunlight does what water cannot always do. It dries, warms and reduces the smells that cling after long use. You copy the behaviour without comment. As you work, fabric darkens with sweat and dust blends into it, creating a uniform that reflects the environment more than personal choice. By afternoon, everyone looks as though they belong here, whether they arrived yesterday or years ago. The land edits appearances efficiently. You feel the weight of your clothes as the day stretches on. Heavy fabric offers protection, but it also demands energy. Each step costs slightly more. You learn to move efficiently, avoiding unnecessary motion. Waste here is not just about supplies. It is about effort. People later studying frontier life sometimes debate whether the discomfort of clothing contributed significantly to fatigue. From your perspective, the answer is simple. Everything contributes. Nothing exists in isolation. Heat fabric work and weather stack until the body feels the sum of them rather than any single cause. As evening approaches, the air cools quickly. You add layers back on grateful now for the same weight that felt oppressive hours earlier. Fabric traps warmth and releases it slowly. You feel the change almost immediately, a quiet relief spreading across your shoulders and chest. You return to your shelter and hang what you can, allowing dampness to escape before night deepens. The smell of worn cloth mixes with wood and earth. It is not unpleasant. It is familiar. You associate it now with effort completed and survival maintained. You clean yourself as best you can, using minimal water and a cloth that has seen better days. Dirt loosens reluctantly. Some of it stays. You accept that. The goal is comfort enough to rest, not perfection. As darkness settles, you lie back and feel how your clothes cushion you against the ground. Fabric replaces softness. Layers replace bedding. You adjust until pressure points ease and warmth settles evenly. Clothing here does not express individuality the way it might elsewhere. It expresses adaptation. Every tear tells a story of movement. Every patch marks a problem solved. You realize that what you wear carries your days with it, absorbing dust, sweat, and effort without complaint. Your breathing slows as you grow still. The fabric around you holds the heat you earned and releases it gently. Tomorrow these same clothes will go back into the world with you ready to be tested again. For now they do their final job of the day. They let you rest. You begin the day noticing how much work happens before anyone calls it work. The fire is coaxed back to life. Water is warmed. Bedding is shaken out and folded away. None of this earns comment, yet without it, the day would stall before it began. Much of this labour belongs to women, though no sign announces that fact. It simply unfolds, steady and essential. You watch hands move, efficiently adjusting sleeves, tying hair back, lifting without hesitation. The rhythm is practiced, learned through repetition rather than instruction. Tasks overlap. While one thing simmers, another is mended. While a child eats, something else is prepared. Time here is layered, not divided. Women on the frontier carry responsibilities that stretch well beyond what many imagined before arriving. They manage food, clothing, health, and often finances, all while sharing in physical labour when needed. Letters from the era frequently reveal surprise at how much fell under their care once reality replaced expectation. You notice how little rest appears between tasks. Pauses exist, but they are brief and purposeful. A moment to sit becomes a moment to sort. A breath taken becomes a chance to plan the next step. Fatigue is present, but it is folded into routine rather than resisted. Conversation flows alongside work, not instead of it. Stories are exchanged while hands remain busy. Advice passes quietly, sometimes in fragments, rather than full explanations. Knowledge here is transmitted through observation more than instruction. You learn by watching how someone balances a pot or wraps a cloth around a child's shoulder to keep warmth in. There is no consensus among historians about whether frontier women experience greater independence or simply heavier burdens. From where you stand, the distinction feels thin. Autonomy arrives alongside responsibility. Choice exists, but so does necessity. Freedom here does not mean ease. You notice a habit that feels small but telling. Items are placed deliberately where they can be reached quickly. Nothing is left where it might trip someone carrying a child or a bucket. Space is organised for movement rather than display. Order here supports endurance. As the day unfolds, you see women step easily between roles. One moment they negotiate supplies. The next they tend injuries or teach children letters drawn in dirt. Adaptability is not praised out loud, but it is relied upon constantly. Children hover nearby, absorbed into the flow rather than separated from it. They are given small tasks early. Carry this, watch that, listen closely. Learning happens through participation. Childhood here is not shortened, but it is shaped differently. You overhear talk of childbirth as casually as talk of weather. It is spoken of with respect, not fear, though concern lingers beneath the surface. Medical help may be distant or unavailable. Preparation matters. Support matters more. Communities rally quietly when the time comes. Researchers later examining frontier mortality rates often focus on men and violence, but the quieter risks faced by women were just as present. Infection, exhaustion, and isolation carried their own dangers. Survival depended on cooperation and shared knowledge. As afternoon light shifts, you watch someone finally sit, posture sagging slightly. Even rest here remains alert. Ears stay tuned for calls. Eyes track movement. Responsibility does not fully release its grip. You sense pride woven through this endurance, though it is rarely spoken. Accomplishment is measured by continuity, meals prepared, children healthy, shelter maintained. These are victories that do not announce themselves. As evening approaches, the pace softens. Work transitions into care. Clothing is adjusted against cooling air. Food is distributed thoughtfully. No one eats until everyone is ready. This coordination feels instinctive, now shaped by countless repetitions. You sit nearby and absorb the atmosphere. The voices are lower. Laughter appears briefly, then fades. Fatigue deepens, but so does satisfaction. Another day has been managed, not conquered, but guided into completion. Night settles gently. You realise how much of the frontier's survival rests on this often invisible labour. Without it, nothing else would function. The West is built not only by expansion and ambition, but by consistency, patience, and quiet strength. As you lie down, you carry this understanding with you. The stories often told later leave out these details, but living here reveals them clearly. The frontier holds because someone keeps it held together. You close your eyes, knowing that resilience often wears a softer face. You notice how quickly children adapt here, not because they are pushed, but because the environment leaves little room for delay. Morning begins with small expectations placed gently but firmly on their shoulders. Fetch this, watch that. Stay close, but not too close. They move through these instructions with an ease that suggests practice rather than pressure. A child runs past you carrying something almost too heavy for their arms. They wobble correct and keep going. No one rushes to intervene. Not out of indifference, but out of trust. Learning here happens through doing, and mistakes are allowed as long as they are not dangerous. Even then, danger is sometimes only recognised afterward. You see lessons happen everywhere, rarely announced. Letters traced in dust with a stick. Numbers counted using pebbles or fence posts. A story told slowly while hands remain busy. Formal schooling exists in some places, but it bends easily to circumstance. Attendance depends on weatherwork and distance. Education fits around life rather than replacing it. By this period, many frontier towns could not sustain full-time schools, relying instead on short terms taught by whoever was available. You sense this informality in the way learning unfolds. Knowledge is practical first. Reading matters because it allows you to understand a label or a letter. Arithmetic matters because it keeps you from being cheated. Children listen closely to adult conversations, absorbing more than they are meant to. They hear talk of supplies, weather disputes, and plans. These fragments settle into understanding long before anyone explains them directly. Awareness comes early here, shaped by proximity rather than intention. You notice play happens in the margins, a game invented while waiting, laughter sparked by something small, movement that looks like fun but also builds strength and coordination. Toys are scarce. Imagination fills the gap without complaint. There is no single agreement about whether frontier childhood was harsher or simply different from what came before. Watching these children, you feel the complexity of that question. They carry responsibility, yes, but they also move freely through open space. Their world is demanding, but it is not narrow. A child helps tend a small injury with surprising confidence. Hands steady, expression focused. They have seen this done before. They know what comes next. Bandaging, cleaning, waiting. Pain is acknowledged but not dramatized. Recovery is expected. Evening draws children inward toward warmth and routine. Stories are told, sometimes repeated, until they become familiar landmarks in the mind. These stories are not always gentle. They teach caution as much as comfort. Still, they are shared softly, voices lowering as fatigue settles. You realize that childhood here is not protected by distance from reality. It is shaped by proximity to it. Fear and wonder coexist, balanced by the steady presence of adults who expect competence without cruelty. As night deepens, children fall asleep. Quickly. Bodies spent, minds quiet. Tomorrow will bring more tasks, more learning, more moments of play, woven into responsibility. You watch this rhythm and understand that survival here depends on continuity. Skills passed on early become habits that last. Lying down yourself, you feel a quiet respect for how quickly the young adjust. The frontier does not wait for anyone to be ready. It teaches by immersion, and those lessons once learned rarely fade. You wake with an unfamiliar weight behind your eyes, a dull pressure that does not sharpen into pain but refuses to leave. Your body feels slower to respond, as if it must negotiate each movement before agreeing to it. Illness here rarely announces itself dramatically. It arrives quietly, testing your attention rather than demanding it. You sit up and wait, listening to what your body has to say. The air inside your shelter feels heavier than usual. Smoke from last night's fire still lingers, faintly mixed with the smell of damp earth and worn cloth. You drink water carefully, noticing how your stomach reacts. Everything becomes a signal now. Out here, sickness is treated with seriousness but not panic. People have learnt the cost of both extremes. Overreaction wastes energy and resources. Ignoring symptoms wastes time you may not have. The balance is learnt through observation and memory passed along in fragments rather than instructions. You hear someone nearby coughing a deep sound that repeats with steady patience. No one rushes over, but no one ignores it either. The person is watched discreetly. Questions are asked indirectly. Has the cough worsened? Has fever followed? Has strength returned after rest? Information circulates quietly like weather updates. Medical care in the 1880s West exists in uneven patches. Some towns have trained doctors, others rely on whoever knows the most or has survived the longest. You understand quickly that distance matters more than credentials. Help that cannot arrive in time is no help at all. You recall seeing a small box yesterday tucked into a corner of a store. Inside were bottles with handwritten labels, their contents opaque and their promises vague. Remedies here blend folk knowledge, trial and error, and hope in equal measure. Effectiveness varies. Belief often does half the work. Someone offers you a tea brewed from local plants. The taste is bitter and unfamiliar. You drink it anyway, trusting the gesture if not the chemistry. People here know what has worked before, or at least what did not make things worse. That knowledge is respected. There is uncertainty woven through these practices that no one bothers to resolve fully. Some treatments seem to help one person and fail another. Recovery is attributed to the remedy when it succeeds, and to resilience when it does not. Explanations shift depending on outcome. You lie back and rest, allowing your body time to adjust. Rest is prescribed generously here, not because it is luxurious, but because it is efficient. A person who recovers slowly is still more useful than one who collapses entirely. Productivity depends on patience as much as effort. You notice how illness changes the rhythm of the day. Voices soften, movements slow, tasks are redistributed without comment. This flexibility keeps the system functioning. No one is indispensable, but everyone is necessary. A child brings you water without being asked. The gesture feels practiced. Care here is learned early, not through instruction, but through repetition. You thank them, and they nod once before moving on. Kindness is offered without ceremony. As the day progresses, your strength returns in small increments. You test it carefully, standing briefly, then sitting again. The land outside continues its business without you. Wind moves. Tools strike wood. Life does not pause, but it accommodates. You think about how easily minor injuries can become serious here. A cut that would be cleaned and forgotten elsewhere demands attention. Infection is an ever-present risk. Clean water, rest, and vigilance become tools as important as any medicine. People later trying to categorize frontier health often struggle with contradictions. Mortality was high, yet many survived conditions that would alarm modern sensibilities. From your position, the explanation feels simple. Attention was constant. Bodies were watched. Changes were noticed early. By evening, your head feels clearer. Appetite returns cautiously. You eat something warm and feel it settle, grounding you. Recovery here is measured not by complete absence of symptoms, but by regained function. You can move. You can think. That is enough. As darkness falls, you reflect on how illness fits into this world. It is neither hidden nor dramatized. It is treated as another variable like weather or supply. You adapt, you accept help, and you return to your role when able. You lie down with a deeper respect for fragility and for the systems that quietly support survival. Health here is not guaranteed. It is managed, protected, and sometimes simply endured. Sleep comes slowly but steadily, carrying with it the hope that tomorrow will feel lighter. You become aware of danger not as a single threat, but as a background condition like weather that never fully clears. It does not dominate every thought, but it shapes how you move, where you stand, and what you choose to ignore. Even on calm days, awareness hums quietly beneath routine. Morning begins with small checks. You glance at the horizon longer than necessary. You listen for sounds that do not belong. A horse moving too fast. A voice raised at the wrong time. These cues register without alarm, filed away until they either fade or sharpen. Crime here is not constant, but it is close enough to matter. Theft happens when opportunity and desperation intersect. Violence, when it appears, is usually abrupt and brief. The stories that linger are not always the most accurate ones. They grow with retelling, shaped by fear and distance. You pass a building that bears the mark of a past incident. A patched wall. A replaced door. No sign explains what happened. Everyone nearby already knows. Memory serves where signage does not. Lessons are absorbed without repetition. Weapons are present, but not always visible. You sense them more than you see them. A weight at someone's side. A posture that suggests familiarity with tools meant to deter rather than impress. Carrying protection here is less about aggression and more about discouragement. You notice how disputes are handled carefully in public. Voices lower rather than rise. Insults are swallowed or redirected. Pride still exists, but it is managed. Consequences arrive faster here, and there are fewer buffers between words and outcomes. There are stories of vigilance committees and spontaneous justice, but what you observe most often is restraint. People understand that escalation costs everyone something. A broken hand removes a worker. A feud divides a community that cannot afford division. As the day progresses, you hear of an incident beyond town. Details are scarce. Someone lost supplies. Someone else was injured but survived. The information passes without embellishment. Enough is shared to adjust behaviour, not enough to provoke panic. You alter your route slightly as evening approaches, not out of fear but out of habit. Certain paths feel safer at certain times. Light matters. Proximity matters. You follow patterns that others follow, trusting collective experience over personal bravado. There is a quiet understanding that safety here is communal rather than individual. People notice when someone does not return on time. Questions are asked gently. Absence is not ignored. Concern spreads quickly, not as alarm, but as attention. Night sharpens awareness further. Sounds travel differently. A footstep carries. A door closing echoes longer. You secure your shelter and check it twice, hands moving automatically. This ritual steadies you. Preparedness replaces worry. You reflect on how danger shapes the pace of life. It does not freeze people into inaction. It encourages foresight. Plans include contingencies. Trust is extended cautiously, then strengthened through consistency. Lying down, you feel alert without being tense. The land outside is quiet enough to rest, but not quiet enough to forget where you are. Sleep arrives when vigilance softens into confidence, when routine has done its work. You close your eyes, knowing that safety here is never absolute, but it is earned through attention, cooperation, and restraint. Tomorrow will bring new uncertainties, but tonight hold steady. That is enough. Order here feels provisional, like something agreed upon rather than enforced. You sense it as soon as the day begins. There is a man who wears a badge, but his authority depends less on metal than on recognition. People acknowledge him with nods that carry weight. They step aside when he passes, not out of fear, but because friction wastes time. You watch how disputes surface, rarely in public at first. They emerge in low voices in pauses that stretch too long in the way someone avoids another's eyes. When words finally rise, they do so carefully. Everyone understands that once a conflict becomes visible, it must be managed, not indulged. The building that serves as a courthouse is modest, its shape suggesting practicality rather than permanence. Inside, the air smells of paper dust and something metallic. A table stands at the centre. Chairs line the walls. There is no raised platform, no sense of distance between those who judge and those being judged. You sit quietly during a hearing that unfolds without ceremony. A disagreement over property boundaries. Voices remain controlled. Evidence is offered through gestures and memory rather than documents. The outcome feels less like a verdict and more like an agreement reached under pressure. No one leaves entirely satisfied, but no one leaves angry enough to escalate. Justice here bends toward resolution rather than punishment. Time and labour are too valuable to waste on prolonged conflict. A person who is fined must still work to pay it. A person who is jailed removes effort from the community. Consequences are considered in practical terms. You notice how often compromise appears disguised as fairness. Each side gives up something. Each side gains something else. The goal is not to prove who is right, but to keep the system moving. Stability matters more than ideology. Later you hear about a case handled differently elsewhere. Swift action, harsh outcome. The story is shared without detail, stripped of drama. It serves as a caution rather than entertainment. You understand that consistency here is uneven, shaped by personality, circumstance, and timing. The lawman speaks rarely, but when he does, his words are measured. He listens longer than you expect. Silence does some of the work for him. People fill it with explanations, concessions, or apologies. Authority here is reinforced through patience as much as force. You notice how records are kept, not meticulously, but sufficiently. Names appear, dates are marked, outcomes are summarised. These notes will matter later when memories blur or loyalties shift. Writing becomes a way to anchor decisions in something firmer than recollection. There are moments when order phrase, a raised voice, a sudden movement. In those moments the room tightens collectively. Hand still, breath holds. Then someone intervenes, not with commands but with presence. A step closer, a look that reminds everyone what is at stake. Outside, you see how the law intersects with daily life. A stolen tool is returned quietly. A debt is acknowledged publicly. A promise is reinforced by witnesses. These small acts reduce the need for formal judgment. Social pressure fills gaps that institutions cannot. You realise that justice here is not blind. It sees relationships clearly. It accounts for history. This can feel unfair if you expect neutrality, but it feels functional if you expect continuity. People are judged in context, not isolation. As afternoon light softens, the courthouse empties. The building returns to stillness. Dust settles. The table waits. Order here is episodic. It appears when needed, then recedes. You reflect on how easily modern ideas of law fail to map onto this place. Rules exist, but they are interpreted through lived necessity. Authority is accepted because it is useful, not because it is abstractly justified. In the evening, you hear laughter from a nearby gathering. Earlier tensions have dissolved into conversation. Resolution does not always leave scars. Sometimes it leaves relief. You return to your shelter feeling a cautious confidence. Disputes will happen, injustice will occur, but there is an effort here to prevent small problems from becoming fatal ones. That effort, imperfect as it is, allows people to sleep. As night settles, you understand that order in the West is not imposed from above. It is negotiated daily, shaped by who shows up and how they behave. You close your eyes, knowing that tomorrow will test these agreements again. For now they hold. You become aware of others on this land, not through introductions, but through presence. Paths cross. Smoke rises from places you did not expect. Movement appears at the edge of vision and lingers there, unresolved. The land feels shared long before anyone says so out loud. Contact is uneven. Some days pass with nothing more than distant figures moving along ridgelines or across open ground. Other days bring closer encounters, a brief exchange of goods, a shared look that weighs intention. Words are chosen carefully and sometimes not chosen at all. You notice how knowledge travels here without paperwork. You learn which areas are better avoided during certain seasons, which routes feel safer at dawn than at dusk. These understandings are offered quietly, often as suggestions rather than warnings. No one dramatizes them. The land itself feels like explanation enough. Trade happens in small, practical ways. Food exchanged for tools. Information offered in return for courtesy. The gestures are restrained, nothing flashy. Mutual benefit is implied, not celebrated. You sense how much restraint is doing the work of peace. Misunderstandings occur anyway. They arrive through assumptions rather than malice. A gesture read incorrectly. A boundary crossed without awareness. When tension rises, it does so sharply, then pauses as if waiting to see whether escalation is truly necessary. You hear conflicting stories. One person recalls cooperation that saved lives during a harsh winter. Another speaks of loss that still feels close. Both accounts feel true, even when they contradict each other. The land holds more than one version of events, and it does not reconcile them for you. Movement across territory feels deliberate. You notice how people avoid certain areas without explanation. Paths curve when they could go straight. This avoidance is not fear, it is respect learned through consequence. There is an unspoken understanding that survival improves when awareness extends beyond yourself. You learn to read signs that are not meant for you. Marks on trees, changes in camp placement, absence where there was once activity. You do not ask questions you do not need answered. You reflect on how quickly relationships shift when pressure rises. Drought, illness, or scarcity changes everything. Cooperation becomes essential, then fragile. Trust expands and contracts like breath. No arrangement feels permanent. In the late afternoon, you witness a brief interaction that leaves little trace. A nod exchanged. An object set down and taken up by another hand. No one watches closely. No one interferes. The exchange finishes and the day continues. Evening brings quiet again. Fires appear at a distance, separate but visible. Smoke drifts upward and disperses into the same sky. The separation feels intentional rather than hostile. Space allows everyone to remain themselves. As darkness deepens, you sense how easily stories simplify what is happening here. Later retellings will flatten complexity into categories that feel insufficient. Living inside it, you recognize the constant adjustment, the careful navigation, the effort required to coexist. You settle into rest with this awareness, still present but softened. The land remains shared. The boundaries remain fluid. Survival here depends on paying attention to more than your own needs. Sleep arrives not with certainty but with acceptance. You do not need full understanding to continue. You need only enough awareness to move carefully tomorrow. The land holds its many histories quietly, and for tonight it allows you to rest. You feel the change before you see it. The ground vibrates faintly, not enough to alarm you, just enough to register. Sound follows distant at first, then clearer, a low rhythmic presence that does not belong to wind or weather. When it arrives fully, it reshapes the day without asking permission. Steel stretches across the land, now cutting lines where paths once wandered. You stand near it and sense how different this kind of movement feels. It is heavy, predictable, relentless. When the train passes, the air shifts. Dust lifts. Conversations pause until the noise moves on. The railroad does not arrive quietly. It brings schedules, expectations, and strangers who do not linger. You watch people adjust their routines around it. Deliveries are timed. Meetings happen earlier. Absences are explained with reference to arrivals and departures that did not exist before. Goods appear that once felt unreachable. Tools stamp far away. Fabric that holds colour longer. Food preserved in ways you have not tasted before. Choice expands, but so does dependence. When the train runs late or not at all, the gap is felt immediately. You notice how distance shrinks unevenly. Some towns flourish almost overnight. Others wither quietly as roots shift elsewhere. People speak about opportunity as if it moves with intention, but you see how arbitrary it can feel from the ground. You overhear disagreement about what this change means. Some welcome the consistency, others mistrust it. There is a sense that something is being gained and something else loosened. No one can quite name what is slipping away, only that it feels lighter than it should. The railroad alters how news travels. Stories arrive faster, but not always clearer. Events that happened days ago are already outdated by the time you hear them. Rumours outrun facts. Certainty becomes harder to hold. You watch a platform fill briefly with motion, then empty just as quickly. Faces blur. Names are exchanged and forgotten. The pace contrasts sharply with the slower rhythms you have learned to trust. You feel both curiosity and fatigue watching it unfold. As afternoon settles, the tracks warm under the sun. Metal holds heat differently than earth. You step carefully aware of how easily something new can injure if misunderstood. Adaptation takes attention. By evening, the land grows quiet again. The train has moved on, leaving behind altered expectations. You return to familiar routines, aware that they now exist alongside something larger. Lying down, you think about how change arrives here. Not all at once, not evenly. It layers itself over what already exists. Sleep comes with the distant memory of vibration still humming faintly, a reminder that tomorrow may feel closer to somewhere else than today did. You sense the town before you enter it. Sound gathers first. Laughter layered with argument. Glass set down too hard. Music that struggles to stay in tune. The air carries smoke, spilled drink, and something sweet that turns sour by morning. Where scattered shelters once stood apart, buildings now lean toward each other, as if drawn together by noise and warmth. You step onto a street worn smooth by traffic. Boots, hooves, wheels, everything has passed through here. Faces turn briefly in your direction, then away again. Attention flickers, but does not settle. In a town like this, curiosity is shallow. Everyone is already busy watching something else. Doors stand open longer than they should. Light spills out in uneven rectangles. Inside, voices rise and fall in waves. You pause at the threshold of one place and feel the pull of it. Not temptation exactly, more like gravity. This is where stories collect before they are retold incorrectly. Inside, the air presses close. Heat gathers where bodies cluster. You find a place to stand that does not block movement and order something simple. The surface beneath your hands is scarred and sticky in places. No one bothers to clean what will be replaced by new marks before morning. Conversation happens in fragments. A sentence overheard. A name mentioned without context. Information here is not shared deliberately, it leaks. You learn things accidentally just by staying still long enough. You notice how disputes flare quickly in this space, then cool just as fast. Words sharpen. Someone laughs too loudly. A chair scrapes. Then another voice intervenes, redirecting attention. A drink is poured. The moment dissolves. This rhythm repeats, practiced and necessary. Music fills gaps that silence would otherwise expose. An instrument passes from hand to hand. A song begins without agreement and ends without applause. The sound is rough, uneven, and oddly comforting. It gives the room permission to breathe together. You observe how loneliness and company coexist here. People sit shoulder to shoulder, yet remain sealed inside their own thoughts. Others lean close, sharing secrets that will not survive the night. The saloon holds everyone briefly, then releases them back into separate paths. Outside, the street feels wider after the press of bodies. You walk slowly, listening as noise fades behind you. Town life is loud by design. It distracts, connects, and exhausts. Silence here would feel unnatural. You pass a group gathered near a doorway, voices low now. Whatever tension existed earlier has shifted into something manageable. The town absorbs conflict the way dirt absorbs rain, leaving only faint traces by morning. As night deepens, lights dim unevenly. Some places remain awake longer, refusing rest. Others close early, choosing quiet over profit. You notice how balance is negotiated nightly, not enforced. You return to your shelter, carrying the residue of sound in your ears. Towns here do not promise belonging. They offer proximity. Connection is possible, but never guaranteed. Lying down, you let the noise recede fully. The hum of the day fades into memory. Sleep comes not from silence, but from knowing where noise belongs and where it does not. Tonight it stays outside. Belief slips into your day almost unnoticed. It does not arrive as doctrine or demand. It settles into small habits, into phrases people repeat when outcomes feel uncertain. You hear it in how someone touches a worn object before beginning work, or how a moment of quiet appears before a risky decision. Faith here is less about answers and more about steadiness. Morning brings a pause. You have learned to respect. Before tools are lifted or fires stirred, some people stand still for a breath longer than necessary. Others murmur words too soft to follow. No one watches closely. Whatever comfort this provides is considered private, even when practiced in shared spaces. You see symbols tucked into everyday life. A book placed carefully near a bed. A mark scratched into wood. A scrap of paper folded and kept close. None of it is displayed for effect. It exists to reassure the person who carries it, not to convince anyone else. Stories circulate about protection and consequence. They are told calmly, without flourish. Someone ignored a sign and suffered. Someone paid attention and avoided trouble. The details shift slightly with each telling, but the message remains. Caution is wise. Arrogance is costly. You notice how belief blends easily with routine. A task begun at a certain hour, a fire tended in a particular way. These patterns feel older than the town itself. No one insists they matter. No one risks ignoring them entirely either. Hope appears in practical forms. People plan ahead not because they are confident, but because planning creates the possibility of improvement. Crops might fail, weather might turn. Still seeds are planted, repairs are made. Faith expresses itself as effort continued despite uncertainty. Children absorb this atmosphere without explanation. They learn which actions invite reassurance and which invite concern. They imitate gestures long before understanding meaning. Belief becomes muscle memory. As afternoon stretches on, you hear someone speak about luck with a seriousness that suggests experience. They do not claim control over it. They claim respect for it. The distinction feels important. Evening gathers people together briefly, a shared meal, a few quiet words, gratitude expressed without expectation of response. These moments do not last long, but they leave a residue of calm that carries into the night. You reflect on how belief here does not promise safety. It offers orientation. In a place where outcomes cannot be guaranteed, direction matters more than certainty. As darkness settles, you lie back and listen to the soft sounds of others preparing for rest. Somewhere a voice finishes a familiar phrase. Somewhere else a light is extinguished carefully. Sleep arrives with the sense that not everything must be understood to be endured. Faith here does not shout, it steadies. And for tonight, that steadiness is enough to let your thoughts slow and your body rest. Entertainment here does not announce itself as a break from survival. It grows out of it, slipping into moments when hands finally pause and daylight loosens its grip. You notice it first in the way people linger instead of dispersing, how conversation stretches a little longer than necessary once work is done. Someone produces an object from a pocket or saddlebag. Cards worn thin at the edges. A harmonica dulled by breath and time. A small book passed from hand to hand. These things appear without ceremony, as if they have always been part of the landscape waiting for the right hour. You sit among others and watch how play unfolds. Rules are flexible. Stakes are modest. Winning matters less than participation. Laughter arrives in short bursts, often surprising the people who release it. The sound feels lighter than it did earlier in the day, as if effort has burned away whatever weighed it down. Stories surface naturally, not speeches but fragments. A memory offered then interrupted by another. The truth of them is less important than the act of sharing. Details shift, but no one corrects them. Precision belongs to work. This belongs to relief. You notice how humour functions here. It is dry, observational, rarely cruel. Jokes land quietly and linger rather than explode. A raised eyebrow does as much work as a punchline. Amusement is subtle, shaped by exhaustion and familiarity. Movement joins in, a bit of dancing that looks more like stretching at first. A foot tapping, then another. No one announces participation. It happens when it happens. Bodies remember joy even when minds are busy managing risk. Children drift into these gatherings, briefly absorbing sound and motion before sleep claims them. They carry fragments of songs and stories with them into dreams, extending the moment beyond its brief lifespan. As the night deepens, entertainment thins rather than stops. A tune trails off. Cards are gathered and returned to pockets. No one clings to the moment. Tomorrow's demands are already pressing lightly against awareness. You realise that these small diversions do more than distract. They restore. They knit people together just enough to make cooperation feel possible again in the morning. Without them, the days would stack too heavily. Returning to your shelter, you carry a faint melody with you, not complete enough to hum, but present enough to soften the quiet. You lie back and let it fade slowly. Sleep arrives wrapped in the afterglow of shared time. Entertainment here does not dazzle or overwhelm. It steadies, reminding you that endurance includes moments of lightness. And tonight, that reminder eases you gently into rest. The season does not change all at once. It shifts in small signals that you learn to notice, because ignoring them costs too much. The morning air carries a different edge now. Not colder exactly, but sharper, as if it has learned something new overnight. You breathe it in and feel your chest respond before your thoughts catch up. Heat builds earlier in the day than it used to. Shade becomes something you plan for rather than stumble into. You adjust your pace without discussing it, taking shorter steps, pausing more often, letting effort stretch across hours instead of compressing into strain. The land sets the tempo, and resisting it only leaves you depleted. By midday, the sun presses down with confidence. The ground radiates warmth back at you, turning stillness into labour of its own. You move tasks that require strength into the earlier hours and save quieter work for later. This rearranging of effort becomes instinctive. No one explains it. You watch, copy and refine. Water behaves differently now. Containers warm faster. Thirst returns sooner than expected. You drink in smaller amounts more frequently, letting your body stay ahead of discomfort rather than chase it. Even the taste seems to shift with temperature flatter and more demanding. Then, without much warning, the opposite arrives. A sudden drop in light. Wind that cuts instead of carries. Evenings shorten. You pull layers closer and feel gratitude for fabric that still holds together. The same garments that felt oppressive weeks ago now feel like shelter. Night teaches its own lessons. Cold settles low, then creeps upward. You learn where to place your body so warmth lingers longer. You arrange bedding with care, smoothing folds, trapping pockets of heat. Sleep becomes a negotiation between rest and vigilance, but it leans more easily toward rest when preparation is thorough. Rain, when it comes, does not always arrive politely. It appears fast, sometimes heavy enough to flatten dust into mud in minutes. Paths disappear. Roofs reveal weaknesses. You move quickly, securing what can be secured, accepting that some things will be altered no matter what you do. You notice how people respond differently to these shifts. Some grow quieter, conserving energy. Others become restless, pushing against the change, as if effort alone might hold it back. Both responses make sense. Neither guarantees comfort. Food changes with the season too. Freshness fades. Preservation takes centre stage. You eat differently, not by preference, but by necessity. Meals become warmer, heavier, meant to stay with you longer. The body asks for this without explanation. Animals adjust before people do. You watch them seek shade, earlier shelter sooner. Their behaviour becomes a guide. When they move, you pay attention. The land communicates through those who live closest to it. Work adapts in subtle ways. Tasks are grouped by exposure. Tools are handled differently as temperatures swing. Metal burns or bites depending on the hour. You learn to test before committing to listen with your hands as much as your eyes. There are moments when extremes collide. A hot day followed by a cold night. Rain that turns to frost by morning. These moments feel precarious, but they pass if you remain attentive. Survival here favours flexibility over strength. You feel these adjustments accumulate inside you. Your reactions grow quicker. Your planning stretches farther ahead. What once felt unpredictable now feels legible, if not controllable. You cannot change the season, but you can move with it. Evening settles into a cooler calm. The sky holds colour longer, then releases it abruptly. You sit and let the day drain out of your muscles. The ache you feel is familiar now, almost reassuring. It tells you that you paid attention. As you lie down, you sense how much the environment has shaped you already. The seasons are no longer backdrops, they are participants. Sleep comes with the understanding that tomorrow will feel different again, and that difference will ask something new of you. You rest, knowing that adaptation here is not a single skill. It is a collection of small responses practiced daily until they become part of how you move through the world. The land changes, you change with it, and tonight that balance holds. Waiting becomes a skill you did not expect to practice so often, not the restless kind, but the patient kind that settles into your bones. You wake knowing that today might bring news or it might not. Both outcomes require the same preparation. You eat, you work, you keep an ear open without letting anticipation take over. Mail arrives irregularly, carried by routes that bend around weather terrain and chance. You learn the signs before it appears. A rider seen in the distance, a wagon dusting the horizon. Conversation shifts subtly when someone thinks they hear it coming. Hopes lift and brace themselves at the same time. When it does arrive, it does not always bring what you want. Sometimes it is a letter meant for someone else. Sometimes it is news already outdated by the time it reaches you. Still, the act of arrival matters. It confirms that the world beyond this place continues to move. You watch people receive letters with expressions that reveal more than words could. Relief, disappointment, confusion, a few read quickly, then again more slowly, as if hoping meaning might change on a second pass. Others fold the paper carefully and wait for privacy before letting reactions surface. You receive something at last. The paper feels thin, the ink uneven. The words carry a familiar voice that feels distant, now shaped by a world that moves at a different speed. You read slowly, aware that this connection is fragile. Responses take time. Misunderstandings linger longer than they would elsewhere. News travels through conversation as much as paper. Someone mentions an event several towns away. Details vary depending on who tells it. You listen for consistency rather than certainty. Patterns matter more than precision. They help you decide whether to adjust plans or simply wait. Isolation settles in between these moments. Days pass without external reference. The horizon becomes your boundary. Routine fills the space where novelty might have lived. You feel both contained and exposed, held by habit and stretched by distance. You notice how people mark time when calendars lose relevance. Events become anchors, the last delivery, the coming change in weather, a task completed, a visit expected. These markers replace dates and weeks, creating a rhythm that feels internal rather than imposed. As afternoon drifts toward evening, you find yourself thinking about places you have never seen and people you may not see again. The mind wanders more easily when the environment stays consistent. Thought travels where bodies cannot. When night falls, you sit quietly listening for sounds that suggest movement beyond your immediate circle. Most nights bring nothing new. A coyote calls. Wind shifts. The world remains large and still. You learn to accept this without frustration. Letters are folded and stored carefully, not just as keepsakes, but as proof. Proof that connections exist beyond the present moment. Proof that you are part of something wider even when it feels distant. You lie down with the awareness that tomorrow may repeat today closely. That repetition no longer feels empty, it feels stabilizing. Waiting here is not wasted time. It is how you remain available for what arrives next. Sleep comes gradually shaped by patience rather than excitement. The world beyond may be far, but it is not gone. And for tonight, knowing that is enough to let your thoughts slow and your breathing deepen. Distance announces itself the moment you consider leaving. Not dramatically, but with a quiet weight that settles into planning. You do not ask how far something is in miles. You ask how long it will take your body, your animal, your patience. Morning light reveals the road ahead in fragments, a curve, a rise, a stretch of ground that looks forgiving until it is not. You prepare carefully because travel here exposes mistakes quickly. Water is checked twice. Straps are tightened, then checked again after the first few steps. You feel for familiar balances. Too much weight on one side changes everything. Too little preparation invites improvisation you would rather avoid. The horse beneath you moves with the rhythm you learn to trust. It senses terrain before you do, adjusting stride and angle without instruction. You listen through your legs and hands, allowing the animal to choose where possible. Partnership here is practical. Control is shared because it must be. Roads exist, but they are suggestions more than guarantees. Ruts mark where others have passed. Tracks overlap, fade and reappear. Weather edits them daily. You read the ground, constantly noticing where it softens, where it holds, where it gives warning through sound or resistance. Travel slows thought. Conversation thins. The mind settles into repetition that feels almost meditative. Step, breath, shift. You become aware of how far you have already gone only when you stop. Progress reveals itself through fatigue rather than landmarks. You pass others moving in the opposite direction. Encounters are brief, a nod, a question exchanged, information offered quickly before distance reasserts itself. You store these fragments carefully. Advice about water ahead, a warning about a stretch of poor footing. These small gifts matter. The sun climbs and changes the work. Heat presses down. You adjust posture, letting fabric protect rather than suffocate. You drink sparingly, resisting the urge to empty what you carry too soon. Thirst becomes a background hum rather than a demand if managed early. When you stop, you choose the spot with care. Shade is evaluated. Wind direction considered. You listen for sounds that suggest movement nearby. Rest here is active, not careless. You stretch, check gear, tend to the animal before yourself. The order feels natural now. You notice how time stretches on the road. Minutes blur. Hours become shapes rather than units. You measure progress by the position of the sun and the feel in your joints. When fatigue shifts from legs to focus, you know it is time to pause. The land changes subtly as you move. Soil colour deepens or pales. Vegetation thins, then returns. These shifts inform your expectations, where water might be found, where shelter might be possible if needed. You store this knowledge without labelling it. It becomes instinct. As afternoon wanes, light softens. Shadows lengthen and offer relief. You feel the day release its grip slightly. Travel becomes easier again, if only briefly. You take advantage of this window covering ground while conditions allow. Approaching evening, you begin to look for a place to stop. Not the most obvious one, not the most convenient, a spot that offers balance. Enough visibility to feel secure, enough protection to rest. You trust your sense more than any rule. You dismount carefully, muscles protesting the change in position. The ground feels different beneath your feet after hours of movement. You let yourself adjust, walking slowly until balance returns. The animal is tended first, water offered, gear loosened, comfort shared. Night settles quickly once the sun leaves. Sound carries farther now. You arrange your space with familiarity movements practiced and efficient. Fire is coaxed gently, light kept low. You eat quietly, aware of how hunger returns after motion. Lying down, you feel the distance travelled settle into your body, not as pride, but as presence. You are where you are because you moved deliberately through what lay between. Tomorrow will ask the same again. Sleep arrives with the sensation of motion still echoing faintly, as if the ground continues to pass beneath you. You let that rhythm carry you, knowing that travel here is not about speed. It is about arriving intact. The promise of sudden wealth has a sound to it. You hear it before you see anything different. Picks striking stone, voices rising and falling with a sharper edge than usual. The rhythm of effort here feels more urgent, as if time itself has become valuable. You step closer and feel the air change thick with anticipation and dust. People move differently around these sites. Faster, less patient. Eyes scan the ground constantly, even when talking. Conversation circles back to the same points again and again. How deep someone dug, what colour the earth turned, whether a particular spot felt right. Hope becomes contagious, passing from person to person with every rumour. You try your hand at it, if only briefly. The work is harder than it looks. Stone resists, earth refuses to cooperate. Each scoop feels like a question asked without guarantee of an answer. Sweat gathers quickly, and your shoulders remind you that effort does not always translate into reward. Around you, small triumphs appear and disappear just as quickly. Someone finds something and gathers a crowd. Another works all day and uncovers nothing but blisters. Reactions vary. Joy bursts outward. Disappointment sinks inward. Both pass through the same narrow channels of patience and endurance. Supplies cost more here. Food, tools, space to sleep. Everything carries a premium justified by possibility. You feel the pressure to succeed not just for gain, but to justify the investment already made. The longer you stay, the harder it becomes to leave without something to show for it. You notice how advice circulates. Tips are shared freely one moment, then guarded the next. Trust shifts with fortune. People who seemed generous yesterday grow quiet today. Those who struggled last week speak more openly now, as if distance from success has softened attachment. Rest is uneasy. Even at night, minds remain alert, replaying decisions, imagining alternatives. Sleep arrives shallowly, interrupted by the scrape of tools or the murmur of someone working by lantern light. Exhaustion builds, but so does stubbornness. There are days when the ground gives just enough to keep you invested. A hint of colour, a texture that feels promising. These moments carry you forward, convincing you that persistence will be rewarded eventually. You learn how easily optimism can renew itself when scarcity surrounds it. Then come the quiet realizations. The body tires faster, supplies thin, The earth does not change its mind simply because you want it to. You watch people make different choices at this point. Some double down, digging deeper both literally and figuratively. Others step back, reassessing with tired eyes. You feel the pull of both impulses, the desire to continue, the wisdom of stopping. Neither feels fully correct. The decision settles, slowly shaped by fatigue, reflection, and whatever remains in your pack. When you finally step away, even temporarily, the noise fades behind you. The land returns to its earlier rhythm. Wind moves grass. Birds resume their patterns. The contrast feels stark. You breathe more deeply without realizing you had stopped. Lying down that night, you think about how easily promise can outweigh probability. The West offers moments that feel like turning points even when they are not. Understanding that difference takes time and often disappointment. Sleep comes with the acceptance that not every effort must pay off to have mattered. Some experiences teach through absence rather than reward. You rest knowing that tomorrow does not require another gamble. It only requires that you wake and continue wiser than before. Animals change how you think about risk. When your livelihood depends on creatures that breathe, panic, wander, and fall ill, certainty becomes something you stop expecting. You wake early and listen first, not for human sounds, but for movement outside. Hooves shifting, a low breath, the quiet reassurance that everything is still where it should be. Cattle require attention even when nothing appears wrong, especially then. You move among them slowly, keeping your presence calm and predictable. Sudden motion unsettles them, so does tension. You learn to manage your own mood because it travels faster than commands. The land opens wide here, and that openness is both gift and threat. Animals scatter easily if startled. Storms arrive with little warning. Fences help, but they are suggestions rather than guarantees. You check them often, mending small failures before they grow into long searches. Driving cattle is less dramatic than stories suggest. It is patient work shaped by repetition. You guide rather than force, using pressure and release. Too much urgency fractures the group. Too little lets them drift. Balance matters more than strength. You notice how quickly weather reshapes priorities. A clear morning invites movement. A heavy sky delays it. Heat exhausts animals before it touches you. Cold stiffens joints and dulls reaction. You adjust routes and timing, constantly responding to conditions rather than plans. Loss happens quietly. An animal lags behind. Another goes down and does not rise again. You mark the moment without ceremony and continue. Stopping does not reverse it. What matters is protecting what remains. Markets influence decisions from a distance. Prices shift unpredictably. You hear about changes days or weeks after they occur. By the time information reaches you, it may already be outdated. You learn to plan with margins, accepting that profit and loss rarely announce themselves in advance. Care extends beyond movement. Water sources are watched, grazing rotated, signs of illness noted early, a cough, a limp, a change in appetite. You respond quickly, knowing delays multiply consequences. At night you rest lightly. Sounds carry across open ground. A distant movement wakes you. You listen until the pattern resolves into something familiar or fades entirely. Sleep comes in segments woven around responsibility. You reflect on how animals shape your pace. They slow you when you rush. They demand attention when you would rather rest. They anchor you to cycles older than ambition. Working with them teaches patience through necessity. When morning returns, you rise and begin again. Care movement, adjustment. Ranching is not a single task, but a continuous relationship. Risk remains present, but it becomes manageable through routine. As you settle into rest again, you feel the steady pull of this life. It does not promise reward, it demands presence. And tonight, presence feels like enough. The animals make their presence known before you see them. A low vibration in the ground. A smell that carries on the breeze, warm and unmistakable. When the herd comes into view, it fills space differently than people do. Broad shapes, slow movement, power held in reserve. You feel smaller near them, not threatened exactly, but reminded that control here is conditional. Your day begins with a routine that looks simple until you perform it yourself. Gates checked, fences walked, water sources inspected for signs of trouble. Each task repeats often enough to feel familiar, but never often enough to feel safe. Something always changes overnight. A post loosened, a rail cracked, tracks where none should be. You move carefully among the animals, aware of how quickly calm can shift. A sudden sound, an unexpected movement. The herd responds as one energy rippling through bodies that outweigh you many times over. You keep your voice low, movement steady. Confidence here is communicated through restraint rather than force. Caring for cattle is not glamorous work. It smells. It stains. It asks for attention when you would rather rest. Yet it offers a rhythm that steadies you. Feed, check, wait, adjust. The animals respond to consistency more than command. They learn your presence and accept it as long as you remain predictable. The land dictates how much you can keep. Grass thins in places without warning. Water sources shift. You learn to read signs that are not obvious at first glance. How the animals graze, how long they linger, which areas they avoid. These patterns guide decisions that cannot be delayed without consequence. Risk is woven into every choice. Too many animals strain the land. Too few leave you vulnerable to loss. Illness moves quietly through a herd if unnoticed. Weather arrives without concern for your planning. You make decisions with incomplete information and live with the results. There are days when everything aligns. The animals are calm. The land holds. Work progresses without interruption. On those days, ranching feels almost peaceful. You move through tasks with a sense of belonging, as if this balance might last. Then there are days when it does not. A storm breaks fencing. An animal goes missing. A sudden change in temperature unsettles the herd. You respond quickly, not because you enjoy urgency, but because delay multiplies damage. Your body learns to act before your mind finishes forming the worry. You notice how people speak about loss here. Not dramatically, not apologetically. A missing animal is acknowledged and accounted for. The impact is measured and absorbed. Emotion appears later, often privately. Publicly, there is work to be done. Evening brings a different kind of vigilance. The herd settles, but attention does not fully release. Sounds carry farther now. You listen for disturbances that do not belong. A sudden shift in movement, a noise that repeats incorrectly. Sleep comes lighter on these nights, shaped by responsibility. You sit near the edge of the pasture and watch the animals breathe, their bodies rising and falling in slow unison. The sound is grounding. It reminds you that your labour supports life beyond your own. That weight feels heavy, but it also feels meaningful. Food tastes different on days spent outdoors this long. Hunger is deeper, but satisfaction arrives faster. You eat simply and feel the warmth spread, easing muscles that worked without complaint for hours. As darkness deepens, you walk the boundary once more, not because you expect trouble, but because presence itself deters it. The fence holds, the animals remain settled, the land quiets. You return to rest with dirt under your nails and the scent of animals clinging to your clothes. These marks do not feel like burdens tonight. They feel like proof of participation. Ranching here is not about dominance, it is about alignment. With animals, with land, with limits you cannot negotiate away. Sleep comes carrying the slow rhythm of the herd with it. Your breathing matches it unconsciously. Tomorrow will bring new uncertainties, but for now, everything rests in balance. And that balance, however temporary, allows you to rest as well. You begin to notice accents before you notice faces. Words bend differently as they reach you, shaped by mouths that learned language elsewhere. Some voices carry rhythms that feel musical. Others sound clipped efficient or careful. In this place, everyone has arrived from somewhere, even those who insist they belong entirely to the land beneath their feet. Morning brings a mix of smells that do not share a single origin. Bread baked one way, meat prepared another. Spices you cannot name drift briefly through the air before disappearing again. You realise that survival here has made room for variety, not out of celebration, but because usefulness travels well across borders. Workplaces become meeting points. You stand beside someone whose gestures are unfamiliar but effective. Tools are held at a slightly different angle. Techniques vary, yet results arrive just the same. You exchange few words at first, relying on observation. Competence becomes a shared language. Names are exchanged slowly. Some are shortened, others altered for ease. A few remain untouched, pronounced carefully by those who care to learn. Identity here adapts not to disappear, but to fit the narrow spaces between necessity and belonging. You notice how traditions survive in fragments. A song hummed under breath while working, a gesture repeated before eating, a day treated with quiet significance, even when no one else marks it. These practices persist without announcement, folded into routine, where they attract little attention. Conflict appears occasionally, sparked by misunderstanding rather than intent. A phrase taken too literally, a custom misread. Tension rises briefly, then resolves through explanation or simply time. People here cannot afford long grudges. Cooperation smooths over differences faster than ideology ever could. You share a meal one evening that blends habits without comment. Someone cooks as they always have. Someone else adds something new. No one debates authenticity. The food disappears, quickly appreciated for warmth and sustenance more than origin. Children move easily between languages and behaviours, adapting faster than adults. They absorb patterns and switch between them without effort. For them, variety feels natural rather than novel. You watch this and understand that mixing here is not a project. It is a condition. Markets reveal the blending clearly. Goods appear that come from distant places by way of long journeys and many hands. Techniques travel with them. So do expectations. Some persist. Others fade quietly when they do not suit the environment. You overhear stories that contradict each other, all spoken with confidence. Memories clash. Explanations overlap without aligning. No one insists on a single version. Truth here is flexible enough to hold multiple perspectives at once. As evening settles, gatherings form that reflect this quiet convergence. Music shifts between styles without pause. Instruments pass from one person to another. The tune changes shape but keeps moving. No one stops to explain why. You reflect on how identity here becomes layered. People are not asked to abandon what they brought. They are asked to contribute something useful. Belonging is earned through presence and effort rather than origin. Later, as you return to your shelter, you think about how easily later stories simplify this blending into neat categories. Living inside it feels messier, quieter, and more practical. Differences matter, but they do not dominate. What matters more is showing up again tomorrow. You lie down with the sounds of mixed voices fading into the night. The West does not erase where people come from. It presses them close enough that adaptation becomes unavoidable. Sleep arrives with the sense that complexity here is not a problem to solve. It is simply how things continue. Change arrives quietly now, not as an event you gather to watch, but as something you notice only after it has already settled in. You wake and realise that a task you once dreaded now takes half the time. A tool fits your hand better. A habit you struggled to remember happens without thought. Progress here rarely announces itself. It accumulates. Small objects appear that shift the day in subtle ways. A lamp that burns longer, a hinge that opens smoothly, a device that saves a few minutes of effort each time it is used. None of these feel revolutionary on their own. Together, they alter the texture of daily life. You see how people respond cautiously to these changes. New things are tested slowly, sometimes set aside and returned to later. Trust is earned through repetition. If something works once, that is luck. If it works again, it becomes interesting. Only after many quiet successes does it become routine. Communication improves in uneven bursts. Messages arrive faster than they used to, though not always when expected. You learn that speed does not guarantee clarity. News still carries gaps. Information still arrives shaped by whoever carried it most recently. Work adjusts around these additions. Tasks are rearranged. Time frees up in places you did not anticipate. You notice how people fill that time not with rest, necessarily, but with other work. Efficiency here does not create leisure so much as capacity. You observe resistance as well. Some prefer what they know even if it costs more effort. Familiar discomfort feels safer than untested ease. No one forces adoption. The land has taught patience. What fits will stay. What does not will disappear quietly. Even your shelter reflects this gradual shift. A repair holds better than expected. A small improvement reduces nightly adjustment. You sleep a little deeper without realizing why. Comfort increases not through luxury, but through fewer interruptions. Tools circulate among people borrowed and returned, sometimes modified along the way. Ownership becomes fluid. What matters is function. A thing that works belongs to whoever needs it most in that moment. You notice how language adapts too. New terms slip into conversation without explanation. Old words shift meaning slightly. Understanding keeps pace with use. No one stops to define. Comprehension happens through context. The rhythm of the town changes subtly. Days feel less reactive. Planning stretches a little farther ahead. Emergencies still happen, but few of them feel completely unmanageable. Preparedness grows in small increments. You think back to your first days here and realise how much energy was spent simply figuring things out. Now the energy goes elsewhere, toward improvement, toward refinement, toward noticing what can be made easier next. Night falls and you prepare for rest with fewer adjustments than before. The routine feels smooth, familiar. You settle in and let the quiet hold. Sleep arrives carrying the sense that survival here no longer consumes every thought. It still matters, but it no longer dominates. Space is open for something like confidence. Not certainty, but capability. You rest knowing that change here does not erase effort. It redistributes it. And tonight, that redistribution feels gentle enough to allow deeper sleep. Age announces itself here through sensation rather than number. You feel it first in the way you rise more slowly, how joints speak up before the rest of your body is fully woken. Morning light finds you already aware of small aches that did not exist when you arrived, or perhaps existed but went unnoticed beneath urgency. You stretch carefully, learning where your limits have shifted. Movements that once felt automatic now ask for attention. You give it willingly. Rushing costs more than it saves. Experience has taught you that listening early prevents consequences later. Memory begins to play a larger role in your day. Not nostalgia, but reference. You remember how something failed once and adjust before it can fail again. You remember weather patterns that caught you off guard and plan differently. The past becomes a quiet advisor present without demanding attention. You notice this change in others too. Faces carry lines shaped by sun and focus. Hair lightens or thins. Voices soften without losing authority. Older bodies move with economy, avoiding waste. They lift only what must be lifted. They speak only when necessary. Efficiency replaces display. You realise that strength here has never been about speed alone. Endurance matters more. The ability to show up again tomorrow and the day after that. You measure capability not by how much you can do, but by how consistently you can do it. There are moments when frustration surfaces. A task takes longer than it once did. A mistake costs more energy to correct. You feel impatience flicker then fade. Experience reminds you that adaptation continues as long as attention does. You notice how younger people watch those who have been here longer, not openly, subtly. They observe how tools are held, how decisions are delayed, how rest is taken without apology. Learning happens without instruction. Respect grows from results rather than explanation. Stories begin to circulate around you differently now. People ask how something used to be done, what worked before, what failed quietly. You answer selectively, aware that advice carries weight. You share what matters and let the rest be discovered through experience. The land responds differently to you as well. Or perhaps you respond differently to it. You read signs earlier, you stop sooner. You choose paths that protect your body rather than challenge it. Pride has less influence here than preservation. Evening brings a deeper kind of tiredness, not exhaustion, but completion. You sit longer before rising. You eat more slowly. You feel the day settle into you rather than fall away. Satisfaction replaces urgency. You notice how memory shapes comfort. Familiar sounds ease you into rest. Familiar routines calm the mind. Novelty still exists, but it no longer demands attention. Stability becomes valuable in ways it was not before. There are reminders of loss too. People who were here when you arrived are no longer present. Some left. Some did not get the chance. Their absence is felt in quiet gaps rather than announcements. You carry these losses without ceremony, letting them inform care rather than harden it. You reflect on how survival here changes its meaning over time. At first it meant lasting through immediate challenges. Now it means sustaining a life that can continue without constant strain. Success looks different from this vantage. Night deepens and you arrange yourself for sleep with practiced care. You know which position eases pressure, which habits help rest arrive. You take these accommodations without judgment. They are not signs of weakness, they are signs of continuity. As you lie back, you think about how age here does not remove you from usefulness. It shifts your role. You offer steadiness, perspective, a sense of proportion. These contributions matter more than ever. Sleep comes gently shaped by familiarity and trust in your own awareness. Tomorrow will bring new demands, but you are equipped to meet them in ways that feel sustainable. You rest knowing that endurance here is not about resisting change. It is about moving with it slowly, deliberately, and with care. The question does not arrive all at once. It forms gradually shaped by repetition and fatigue. You notice it first in small hesitations, a pause before beginning a task, a longer look at the horizon than usual. The thought settles in quietly. Do you keep going, or do you stop here? Leaving is not failure in this place, though it sometimes feels that way. Staying is not victory either. Both choices demand something. You weigh them without ceremony, letting the days provide evidence rather than forcing a decision. You watch others make their choices. Some announce it, openly packing with urgency, voices tight with relief or regret. Others fade out slowly, reducing their footprint over weeks until absence becomes fact. A shelter left standing, a tool passed on, a path no longer taken. You consider what you have invested: time, strength, attention. These are harder to account for than supplies. You ask yourself whether the land still answers when you listen, whether the routines still feel purposeful or merely habitual. There are mornings when everything aligns, work flows, the body cooperates, the future feels manageable. On those days, staying feels natural, almost inevitable. The place fits you and you fit it. Then there are days when effort multiplies without reward. Small setbacks pile up. Fatigue arrives early. On those days, leaving feels like relief rather than retreat. You imagine rest that does not require vigilance, space that does not demand constant negotiation. Advice comes unprompted. Someone tells you they almost left once then did not. Someone else admits they should have gone earlier. These stories do not cancel each other out. They simply exist side by side, offering no clear answer. You test the idea of leaving in practical ways. What would you take? What would you leave behind? Who would you tell first? Imagining these steps makes the choice feel more real, less abstract. It also reveals attachments you did not realize had formed. You walk the edges of what you have built. The shelter, the paths you favor, the places where effort has left visible marks. These signs of presence complicate the decision. They represent time that cannot be recovered, only acknowledged. Staying asks for renewed commitment. Leaving asks for acceptance of uncertainty elsewhere. Neither option promises ease. You realize that the difficulty lies not in choosing correctly, but in choosing honestly. As evening settles, you sit quietly and let the question rest without answering it. Urgency has rarely improved outcomes here. Patience, on the other hand, has often revealed what matters most. Night arrives without comment. The familiar sounds return. Wind, movement, stillness. You lie down knowing that tomorrow does not require a final decision. It requires only that you wake and continue one way or another. Sleep comes carrying the weight of possibility, but not its burden. For now, the choice remains open. And in this place, that openness feels like its own kind of freedom. Strength shows itself now in ways you did not expect when you first arrived. It is no longer loud or urgent. It appears in moments that would have gone unnoticed before. A repair completed before it becomes necessary. A calm response where frustration once lived. You begin to recognize these moments not as luck, but as evidence of adjustment. Morning unfolds gently. The light feels familiar, less demanding. You move through your routine without rushing, aware of where effort is best spent and where it can be spared. The body responds with quiet cooperation, not enthusiasm, but reliability. That feels like progress. You notice how often small victories occur. A tool holds longer than expected. Water remains cool through the heat of the day. A conversation resolves itself without tension. None of these would make a story worth telling elsewhere, yet here they accumulate into something meaningful. You help someone without being asked, not out of obligation, but because you see the need early enough to act easily. They thank you with a look rather than words. Assistance here does not require explanation. It flows naturally when awareness sharpens. Resilience takes shape in habits. You prepare for tomorrow before exhaustion claims you. You put things where you will find them easily. You choose rest before fatigue becomes injury. These decisions feel obvious now, though they once required conscious effort. There are moments when memories surface unexpectedly, early mistakes, hard lessons. You do not dwell on them. They serve as quiet reference points, reminders of distance travelled rather than wounds reopened. Experience here layers rather than erases. You observe the same steadiness in others. People who once reacted quickly now pause. Voices soften. Movements become deliberate. The community holds together through countless such adjustments, none dramatic, all essential. Even conflict feels different now. When disagreement arises, it is met with patience rather than defensiveness. You listen longer. You speak less. Resolution arrives through understanding rather than insistence. This does not guarantee harmony, but it reduces damage. Midday passes without incident, and that absence feels notable. Calm days once made you uneasy. Now they feel earned. You understand that stability is not the default here. It is maintained through attention and restraint. You take a moment to sit without purpose, something that once felt wasteful. The land does not demand constant movement today. You allow yourself to be still and notice details that effort usually obscures. The way shadows shift, the sound of insects rising and falling, the steady presence of the horizon. This quiet observation restores something subtle, not energy exactly, but clarity. You feel better prepared for whatever comes next, even without knowing what that will be. As afternoon leans toward evening, you complete small tasks that will make tomorrow easier. A container refilled, a path cleared. These actions carry satisfaction disproportionate to their size. You understand now that ease is constructed piece by piece. You share a brief exchange with someone passing by. Nothing significant is said, yet the familiarity feels grounding. Belonging here is not declared, it is felt through repeated proximity and shared effort. When night approaches, you prepare your space with calm efficiency. The motions are practiced. You trust them. There is comfort in this trust in knowing that you have learned enough to care for yourself without constant vigilance. Lying down, you reflect on how resilience has changed its shape. It is no longer about enduring extremes. It is about maintaining balance, about responding appropriately rather than reactively, about recognizing when enough truly is enough. Sleep comes easily tonight, carried by the sense that you are no longer testing yourself against the land. You are moving with it. That alignment feels like the quiet reward for all that came before. Looking back happens without intention. You do not sit down to review your life here. It surfaces while you work, while you rest, while you move through spaces that now feel shaped by memory as much as by use. A place where something broke once still draws your attention. A path you avoided early on now feels familiar underfoot. You notice how costs reveal themselves slowly, not just in what was spent or lost, but in what was given up quietly, time that might have been used elsewhere, strength that does not return as easily, choices narrowed by earlier decisions that felt small when you made them. The land holds evidence of this accounting. Worn ground where you walked the same route too many times. Repairs layered over older repairs. Objects kept long past their ideal lifespan because replacing them would require more effort than they are worth. These marks are not failures, they are records. You think about the stories that will be told later, how they might compress years into a few sharp moments. A storm survived. A risk taken, a turning point declared. Living here, you know how misleading that compression can be. Most of what mattered happened between those moments in days that looked ordinary from the outside. You remember people who passed through briefly. Some stayed just long enough to test themselves. Others left as soon as reality pressed back. A few surprised you by lasting, reshaping themselves quietly until they fit. Their paths intersected with yours for a time, then diverged. The traces they left remain. Regret appears occasionally, but it does not dominate. When it surfaces, it is specific rather than general. You wish you had rested sooner on certain days, spoken differently in certain moments, listened more carefully when advice was offered without urgency. These reflections arrive gently without accusation. You also recognize gains that are easy to overlook, skills that now feel automatic, judgment sharpened through repetition, the ability to read situations quickly and respond without panic. These changes do not announce themselves, but they shape every interaction. The idea of progress feels different now. It no longer points forward exclusively, it loops. What you learned early continues to matter. What you learned later reframes what came before. Understanding deepens rather than replaces. You sit with the knowledge that not everything endured here was necessary. Some hardship could have been avoided. Some lessons were more expensive than required. Yet you also see that avoidance would have taught something else entirely. There is no clean ledger, only experience carried forward. As the day fades, you watch light settle across the land and think about how much effort went into making this place workable. Not comfortable in any lasting sense, but functional. Enough to live inside without constant resistance. That achievement feels substantial now. You hear familiar sounds as evening approaches, footsteps, tools being set down, voices exchanging brief updates. These signals tell you that others are doing their own quiet accounting. Each person carries a version of this place shaped by their own endurance. You prepare for night with deliberate care, not out of anxiety, but respect. You know what can be left until morning and what cannot. That distinction took time to learn. It still guides you. Lying down, you feel the weight of what has been required and what has been learned. The West has asked much, it has taken more than it gave at times. Yet it has also revealed capacities you did not know you possessed. Sleep comes carrying this balance, not triumph, not defeat. A clear understanding that living here demanded trade-offs, and that those trade-offs shaped you in ways that will persist wherever you go next. Tonight you rest with the quiet acceptance that costs and meaning are intertwined. One does not exist without the other, and in acknowledging both you find a steadiness that allows the day to release you at last. Night settles with a familiarity that surprises you. Once darkness felt like a test you prepared for with care and caution, now it feels like a closing gesture, the land drawing a curtain over the day. Stars appear one by one, clearer than anywhere you remember from before, scattered generously across the sky, as if nothing needs to be conserved up there. You lie back and let your eyes adjust. The ground beneath you holds the memory of heat, releasing it slowly. The air cools, but not sharply. You recognize this balance instantly. Your body no longer tenses at every change. It has learned what deserves attention and what can be allowed to pass. Around you the world grows quieter in layers. Distant movement fades. Voices soften then disappear. Even the insects seem to agree on a gentler pace. The land does not fall silent, but it becomes less demanding. That difference matters. You think about what it has meant to live here, not in stories or summaries, but in days like this one. Days built from small decisions repeated often. Where to step, when to rest, what to fix now, and what to leave for later. Survival did not arrive as a single victory. It arrived as continuation. You realise that living in the 1880s Wild West was never about matching legend. It was about learning limits and working within them. The land did not care who you thought you were when you arrived. It responded only to what you did consistently. Over time, that consistency shaped you in return. Your shelter feels familiar now, not because it is comfortable in a modern sense, but because it fits your expectations. You know how the air moves inside it. You know which sounds belong and which do not. That knowledge replaces fear with recognition. You reflect on how much of your life here has been quiet, not dramatic, not worthy of retelling in a few bold lines, and yet that quiet carried weight. It taught you patience, awareness, the value of small adjustments made early. Outside, the land stretches on vast and indifferent in the best possible way. It does not demand interpretation tonight. It allows you to exist without explanation. That permission feels earned. You breathe slowly and notice how your body settles into rest without resistance. Muscles release. Thoughts lengthen, then drift. The day no longer presses for resolution. It has said what it needed to say. You understand now that living here was never about conquering anything. It was about learning how not to be defeated by daily demands. That lesson remains with you even as sleep approaches. The stars blur slightly as your eyes grow heavy. The ground supports you without comment. The air moves gently across your skin. Nothing needs immediate attention. Nothing is wrong. You let yourself rest fully, knowing that you have lived this place as it truly was. Not through legend, but through presence. And that presence, steady and quiet, is enough to carry you into sleep. Now let everything slow just a little more. There is no more planning required tonight. No decisions waiting. No edges left to check. You are safe in this moment, held by the quiet rhythm of the land and the steady breath of the night. The long days, the effort, the attention you have given to each small detail have led you here to this gentle pause where nothing is asked of you. Let your breathing deepen naturally without forcing it. Inhale slowly, feeling the air fill your chest. Exhale just as slowly, letting the weight of the day drift away. The sounds around you soften further now. They no longer ask to be noticed. They simply exist, like distant waves or a far-off wind moving through open space. Your body knows how to rest. It has learned through repetition and care. You do not need to guide it anymore. Thoughts may come and go, but you do not have to follow them. Let them pass like clouds across a wide sky. Nothing needs to be solved before morning. The Wild West, with all its demands and lessons, fades gently into the background. What remains is calm, steady, quiet. Stay here as long as you like. Sleep can arrive whenever it is ready. Sweet dreams.